My name is Clara Bennett, and I used to think my life was a beautiful story in the making. At 28, I had a career I loved, a fiancé who was the envy of all my friends, and a future that sparkled like the ring on my finger. Everything changed the night of our engagement party. What should have been the happiest evening of my life spiraled into something I couldn't have imagined even in my darkest dreams. The event was held at my parents' estate, a sprawling country house with string lights woven through the trees and a jazz band playing near the garden. Everyone who mattered was there, glasses in hand and smiles in place. My younger sister, Elise, floated through the crowd in a sleek emerald dress, a glass of champagne in one hand and her other hand resting lightly on her stomach. I noticed that gesture, subtle as it was. I noticed a lot of things that night. There had been signs, of course. Whispers between Elise and my fiancé, Aaron. Lingering glances, excuses that didn't quite hold up. I'd buried my suspicions deep, not wanting to believe the worst. But that evening, as I stood beside Aaron, accepting congratulations and beaming at familiar faces, I felt a strange chill. Instincts rarely lie. Family, loyalty, and trust had always been the cornerstones of my life. My parents raised Elise and me to believe in the strength of our bond, that we were each other's protectors. But what happens when those who claim to love you become the architects of your betrayal? Looking back, I understand now that life doesn't unravel all at once. It frays slowly at the edges before everything collapses. What followed that night set me on a path I never expected to walk. Betrayal from the people I trusted most left me with a choice: crumble, or rise from the ashes with a stronger heart and sharper vision. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about resilience. It's about rediscovering who you are when the people closest to you try to break you. And it's about choosing your own path, even if it means walking away from everything you thought you wanted. If you're still with me, I'll take you back to the night it all began. The night Elise made her announcement, and my world cracked open like an old, forgotten mirror. The jazz music had just shifted to a softer melody, and the clinking of champagne flutes echoed like a soundtrack to our lives. I was smiling politely at an elderly aunt when Elise stepped forward, her eyes gleaming, not with joy, but something darker, something rehearsed. "I have an announcement to make," she said, raising her glass. The crowd quieted. I turned to Aaron, and he gave me a tight smile. That was the moment I knew. "I'm pregnant," Elise said, her voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. "And the father is Aaron." Gasps rippled through the garden. The music stopped. My mother dropped her glass. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. All eyes turned to me. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream or faint. I just looked at Aaron. He tried to speak, but I raised my hand and stopped him. My voice, when it came, was calm. "I see," I said. "People always expect you to break, especially when your sister confesses to sleeping with your fiancé in front of your entire family." But I'd seen the signs. I'd prepared for this moment without knowing it. My silence wasn't weakness. It was the storm that comes before the reckoning. My parents rushed to Elise's side, fussing over her, asking if she was okay, as if she were the victim here. I watched it all with an eerie sense of detachment. Elise clung to our mother, fake tears staining her flawless makeup. Aaron stood frozen, pale as the moonlight. I excused myself, left the party, and walked down the long gravel path that led away from the house. My heels crunched the earth with every step. I didn't cry that night. I didn't need to, because I had a plan. It was time to stop being the girl who endured. It was time to become the woman who takes back control. The days that followed were brutal in their stillness. My parents called me only once, their tone clipped and insistent. Elise needs your support right now. We all make mistakes, Clara. Mistakes. That's what they called her betrayal. That's what they called Aaron impregnating my sister and announcing it at what was supposed to be my celebration. I didn't answer their calls after that. Instead, I turned to action. I hired a private investigator named Jessa Marks. She was sharp, efficient, and unbothered by the soap opera mess I laid out for her. Within 2 weeks, Jessa uncovered a timeline that made no sense. Fertility treatments, clinic appointments, and DNA inconsistencies. I paid extra for a DNA test. Elise's behaviour never quite fit the picture she painted. I remembered Michael, her ex-boyfriend who vanished without explanation a year ago. It wasn't long before Jessa tracked him down. He was in Oregon now, working at a wildlife refuge. A quiet man with eyes like winter fog. When we spoke, Michael was hesitant, but something broke in him when I showed him the clinic records. His voice trembled as he confirmed it. Elise had tricked him. She had taken one of their frozen embryos, stored during their IVF journey before their breakup, and implanted it without his consent. I had the proof now. The baby wasn't Aaron's, it was Michael's. Elise had orchestrated the whole charade to destroy me and secure what she thought was a better life. I wasn't going to confront her privately. No, Elise and Aaron were planning their own engagement party now, and I intended to be there, not as a guest, as the storm. I spent the week leading up to it rehearsing every word I'd say, every document I'd present. Jessa put everything in a sleek folder with tabs, legal proof, timelines, medical records, a signed statement from Michael. The party was lavish, more expensive than mine had been, I noticed. Elise had always competed with me, even when she pretended not to. I arrived in a red dress, sharp and elegant, the kind that made people whisper. I let the event reach its peak before stepping forward. Aaron spotted me first, his face draining of colour. Elise froze, her laughter dying in her throat. I raised my glass. "I have an announcement," I said, echoing her voice from weeks ago. The irony was not lost on anyone. Then I began to speak. There was a moment, a delicious, terrible moment, when the silence was absolute. No music, no chatter, just my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Elise," I began, "you said Aaron was the father of your child. But that's not true, is it?" She opened her mouth, but I held up the folder and started to pull out the papers. "Here are the medical records from the fertility clinic. You used a stored embryo, one that belonged to you and Michael." I looked at her steadily. "Michael, who, by the way, never gave you permission." Gasps again. Someone dropped a glass. The whispers began. Aaron looked at Elise, his face pale with confusion. "Is this true?" Elise shook her head violently. "She's lying. She's just bitter." I cut her off. "Michael signed a sworn statement. I spoke to him. He knows everything." I stepped closer. "And you, Aaron, should probably see this." I handed him the DNA results. "You're not the father. You never were." Aaron took the paper with trembling hands, his eyes darting across the page. Then he looked at Elise, horror etched across his face. "You lied to me," he said, voice breaking. "You destroyed Clara's life for what? A fantasy?" Elise tried to speak, but the crowd had already begun to shift, pulling away from her, whispering behind hands. The room closed in. Her perfect image was crumbling like a sandcastle in the tide. I turned to leave, but not before meeting my mother's eyes. She looked at me with something like shame, something like regret. I didn't linger to decipher it. Outside, the cool air hit my face like a blessing. I walked into the night, not with anger, but with clarity. the aftermath of that night spread like wildfire. By morning, everyone in our town seemed to know the truth. Elise's meticulously curated image unraveled on social media, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Some people defended her, clinging to the idea that she was just desperate for love, but most turned their backs. My parents didn't call. I suppose they didn't know what to say. It wasn't until days later that I received a letter from my mother. Not a phone call, not a visit, just a note. In her familiar cursive, she wrote, "We didn't know. We're sorry. But family forgives." Forgiveness. They expected that from me. As if their blind loyalty to Elise was a minor slip. As if I hadn't been abandoned when I needed them most. Meanwhile, Elise retreated from public life. She moved back into my parents' house, hiding behind closed curtains. I heard she tried to reach out to Michael, but he refused all contact. I didn't blame him. Aaron showed up at my door 3 times. Each time, I let him speak. He apologized, cried even, confessed that he'd been manipulated, that he'd been a fool. I believed him, but that didn't mean I forgave him. Trust, once broken, is never the same, and I had no interest in patching together something so deeply damaged. I focused instead on rebuilding, on becoming whole again. My grandmother, who had passed the year before, had left me documents, deeds, bank statements, letters, pieces of a quiet fortune she'd hidden from the rest of the family. I was her favourite, though she never said it aloud. In those pages, she'd written, "You'll know what to do when the time comes." And I did. That old bookstore downtown had always been my escape. Dusty aisles, the scent of old paper, the quiet hush of turning pages. It was where I found myself as a teenager, hiding from Elise's spotlight and my parents' expectations. Now, it would be mine. With the inheritance from my grandmother, I bought the building. I refurbished it slowly with the help of a kind contractor and a lot of late nights. I called it Phoenix Books, because like me, it had risen from neglect and ash into something beautiful. Opening day was modest. Friends from work, a few curious neighbours, and my childhood English teacher who used to slip me extra novels when no one was looking. I stood at the counter, the register humming softly, and felt more pride than I ever had in a diamond ring or designer gown. Life became quiet, in the best of ways. I didn't attend Elise's baby shower. I didn't answer Aaron's final message. I no longer felt the need to. Instead, I hosted book clubs, poetry nights, and children's story hours. I made friends, real ones, who saw me for who I was and not who I was supposed to be. And every now and then, when the shop closed, I'd sit on the little bench outside, cup of tea in hand, and look at the sky. I understood now that the best revenge wasn't anger or vindication. It was freedom. It was peace. It was building something so whole that no one's betrayal could ever shake it. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting everything in golden light, I sat on my grandmother's old porch swing. The house had been left to me too, quiet and tucked away on the edge of town. I went there when I needed to breathe. The wind rustled the trees. My tea was warm in my hands. I felt it then, something I hadn't in years. Peace. In the distance, I could hear the faint sounds of life. A dog barking, laughter drifting from an open window. The world had gone on as it always does, but I had found my footing in it again. I wasn't Clara the betrayed. I wasn't Clara the sister, the daughter, or the ex-fiancée. I was just Clara. And for the first time, that was more than enough. The sun was melting into the hills when I returned to my grandmother's porch one last time that summer. The swing creaked beneath me, weathered by time and memory. I sipped tea from the chipped blue mug she always used, letting the warmth sink into my bones. The view from that hill never changed. Wide skies, the stretch of meadow, the hush of evening. But I had changed. Radically. irreversibly. It's funny, isn't it? How life will rip everything from your hands just to make room for something better. I thought betrayal would break me. I thought losing Aaron and being betrayed by Elise would leave a permanent wound I couldn't heal from. But pain, it turns out, is a hell of a teacher. It strips away illusion. It forces you to face yourself in the rawest, most unforgiving light. I'm proud of the woman who stood in that engagement party, calm and clear, refusing to let the chaos consume her. I'm proud of the woman who didn't let bitterness poison her, who built something real out of the wreckage. Phoenix Books is more than a business now. It's a living, breathing community, a place where stories are shared and healing happens page by page. I've watched kids pick out their first books with wide eyes. I've hosted authors who once felt invisible. And every person who walks through those doors reminds me of why I chose this path. Elise had her baby. I heard through whispers that she moved to a new city, tried to start over. I don't know what kind of mother she's become, and I don't need to. We haven't spoken, and maybe we never will. That's okay. Not all stories need reconciliations. Some just need endings. As for Aaron, I like to believe he's learned something too. That maybe, somewhere in his own quiet reflection, he found the courage to face his actions. But again, that's not my concern anymore. What matters is this. I didn't let them define me. I didn't let their betrayal write the final chapter. I took the pen back. I wrote something new. And now, with the sun casting its final golden rays over the fields and the wind warm on my skin, I know that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is peace. This is freedom. This is me.